Welcome to AWAI's Great Books Club with your host, Marcella, Allison.
I want to welcome everybody to the March AWAI's Great Books Club call, and I am super excited this month because our special guest is Parris Lampropoulos, my mentor for the past decade and then some, as well as some of my fellow apprentices who have been working with Parris. And we are reading a book called Mastery by George Leonard, which Parris had us read when I was going through his apprenticeship training. So today we're going to have a lot of different speakers on the call. I'll try to remember to introduce each person by name, and we're going to go through the book and go over some of the highlights, and I'm very excited about this, and I think we're all going to have a great time and learn a lot. So without further ado, I want to introduce Parris Lampropoulos. As I said, he's been my mentor for over 10 years. He's an A-list writer for Boardroom, Soundview, Healthy Directions, Rodale. I could go on and on and on. Parris was mentored by Clayton Makepeace, which is why Clayton often calls me his granddaughter, because he claims that Parris is passing on the tradition. And Parris, I really appreciate you joining us on the call today. I know you have an incredibly full schedule, and just your willingness to do this again live with all of us and to go over the book again. I really appreciate it, and I'm really excited to have you as my guest today.
Thank you, Marcella. And by the way, I wish my hair still looked like that picture you have there.
Oh, you are still one sharp dude, let me tell you. I am fortunate to not only have great mentors, but great-looking mentors as well, I say. So I also want I want to introduce some of our special guests. You'll notice this picture is from our crazy adventure in New York. And you will see on the far left is Barnaby Kalin. Next to him, peeking through with the beard, is Paul Martinez, who has just joined us. That's Leah, and then, of course, Parris, and then Shin Fun, who's on the call with us, and then Lexi, who could not join us today. But this is when we were participating in what Leah called Parris's Great Death March through Manhattan tour of New York, and Shin Fun's infamous, what we say, $300 cab ride from the airport, although he did end up with a visa. I wanted to say that one of the greatest things about being an apprentice with Parris is the community and the ability to not just learn from a great teacher, but to learn from your peers. And I know, Denise, this is really something I've seen you guys really try to build up through Circle of Success, so that you are involved in a really close-knit learning group of your peers. And for my money, I think that is one of the best ways to learn, because for me, learning in community is completely different than trying to sit at my desk and learn, on my own in a book. And that's what we're trying to do with the book club. We're trying to learn in community, hear from each other. I'm going to ask one more thing, which is, of all of our speakers, if you need to, or if there's background noise, feel free to mute and unmute as I'm asking you questions, and that'll also keep our background noise to a minimum. So, Parris, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, you had us read this book. Barnaby and I were in let's see, Barnaby, you were in the same group with me, so that means you've been with Parris for over a decade also, right?
Pretty close, yeah, pretty close to it.
And then Shin Fun and Paul, did you guys come in at the same time? Is that a little bit after us? Is that right?
I think we were both in the next group because I think my 6-year anniversary with Parris would actually be in June of this year.
So you can see we've been together a long time, which I think is part of what makes this group so strong. Parris, I know you had our first group read this book, and I just wanted to kick off by asking you, why would you have us read Mastery? I mean, this is sort of a book about human potential, and it's about, it's from this black belt Aikido, is that how you say it, master? And
Aikido.
Aikido master. So after all, this isn't like one of the traditional books about copywriting. So why did you feel like this is so important for us as apprentices and aspiring copywriters to read? I'm just curious.
Well, because I didn't want you to kill yourself. You know, it's very difficult. The training is very difficult. The crits can be brutal. And I wanted people to understand that there's nothing wrong with you if it's taking you a long time to climb the mountain, because it's a very tall mountain, and there's a lot of plateaus, and there's a lot of not just plateaus, but there's backsliding that happens, you know? So I wanted people to understand that, and that was the main reason that I assigned the book. Another reason is just that it's good stuff to know about anything you want to try to master.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, and I think it's particularly true about the arts, whether it be writing or music or a sport. I mean, he talks about how this started out really from research in sports, but then expanded to really mastering anything. And I know this is something that Mark Ford talks a lot about, too, in terms of what does it take to truly master a craft. How many hours do you have to put in before you even, you know, can begin to consider yourself somewhat skilled or experienced. I love these quotes. This is from the introduction of the book, where he explains what mastery means. And George Leonard says, mastery is a mysterious process during which what is at first difficult becomes progressively easier and more pleasurable through practice. The quick fix doesn't work in the long run and is eventually destructive to the individual and the society. If there is any sure route to success and fulfillment in life, it is to be found in the long-term, essentially goalless process of mastery. This is true, it appears, in personal as well as professional life, which you just mentioned. I wanted to start the call by asking you, Parris, if you would be willing to share just a little bit about your own personal road to mastery in copywriting. How did you attain it, and how do you continue to maintain it? I mean, you are one of the few writers who consistently writes at a, you know, almost nosebleed level compared to where I'm at. You have a crazy, insane win rate compared to other writers. How did you achieve mastery, and how do you maintain it at that level for decades, really, since I've known you and even before I met you?
Okay. So in the example of copywriting, if you want to simplify what copywriting is, it's salesmanship combined with writing combined with creativity. So it's those three things, right?
Exactly.
Writing is something that I was already pretty good at because I had done a lot of writing in school. My teachers, my professors told me, well, you should go into writing. You're a great writer. And, of course, I said, but I hate writing. I want to do something where I can make money. So I went into sales. And I am not a born salesman. I'm an introvert. I was shy by nature. I was less in tune with my emotional side back then. I was just very logical and rational and would try to make logical, rational arguments to get people to buy from me. And that didn't work. You know, I had studied debate in college, argumentation, rhetoric, how to advance an argument.
Which is definitely left-brained, right? That's definitely logic.
It's really left-brained stuff, and it's really funny because I remember a professor who said, well, you make your claim and then you provide your evidence, which is all well and good. That's something we all do in our copy and in our sales. But when he said there's the other way of doing it where you tell people the consequences of their action, and we don't like to do that because that's beneath us. That's sophistry. Interesting, right? I mean, you know, so it's practical. They don't want to teach it, right?
Right.
So anyway, in the beginning of my sales career, I found that I would be arguing with the customers, and I would win the argument and lose the sale.
Oh, my God, that's a classic line. I would be arguing with the customers, and I would win the argument and lose the sale. I mean,
right.
I think we all do that, especially when you go up against something that they disagree with.
Yeah, you cannot violate your customers' beliefs.
No, you can't fight them into buying.
You're done. You know, one of the first books I have you guys read before you read this, even before anything, I think, is Dale Carnegie, right?
Yep.
How to win friends and influence people.
And you taught me well, because that's the first book everybody read in this book club.
Oh, okay, good. So, you know, if you had to distill the essence of that book in one sentence, that would be, it's about them, not you.
Right.
Right? So there was a long road of me in the wilderness for 10 years struggling. You know, people who know my career as a copywriter say, oh, this is a guy, he started writing copy, and within like 3-4 years he was at the top. And that may be true, but what they're missing is the 10 years before that when I struggled.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blessed to be in real estate sales. And when I say blessed, what happened is I started selling real estate in New York in 1984 when any idiot could make money. And then the bottom dropped out of the market after 87. And really 1990 with tax reform is when the market really got killed. And then it was like people were dying. So many people left the business. You really had to learn how to sell to survive. And so I kind of did and got pretty good at it, and then found out that there's this thing called copywriting that combines sales and writing, and took off from there. The third component of it, creativity, I think I had to learn also. I don't think I'm a naturally creative person. I think I had to build those muscles. And there's a lot of techniques for that, and we'll maybe talk about some of them today. But that's how I got it. And as far as continuing to do it, the answer is very simple. There's no, you've never arrived. It's a journey. There's no top of the mountain. The mountain keeps going. You know where the top of the mountain is. You know when I'll know I can stop learning is when I get 100% response rate to all my promotions.
I think that's a great line. You can stop. So everyone who's listening here, I just want to point that out. You now have permission to stop learning once you have received 100% response rate from your promotions. And if you ain't got that, you need to be on these book club calls, and you need to keep learning.
Keep learning. Keep honing your craft. Keep practicing. It's all about practicing and practicing well, practicing good habits, not practicing bad habits. Because if you practice bad habits, you're just reinforcing the bad habits, right? If you have a lousy golf swing and you practice it over and over, you're going to learn how to do that lousy golf swing pretty well. So I always tell them, this will be a good tip, I think, for the listeners, is we have a checklist in our shop, right?
Yep.
That you have to go through. And there's stuff on that checklist that one of them is every single sentence has to transition from the one before and to the one afterwards, right?
Right.
So I tell people every time you write something, you use that checklist. And that's what I did for the first 2 years. Every time I sat down, I used the checklist. And I tell them, I don't care if you're just writing an email to somebody. I don't care if you're writing a damn grocery list. You're using that checklist because that's how you develop the neural pathways, the habits, the good habits. Anytime you don't use the checklist and you're just following off a sloppy email, you are practicing the sloppy writing.
Well, and I think the other thing is it's like you've institutionalized the idea of practice and practice consistently doing it the right way. So if you have the checklist, it's really hard to get off track because you have to follow the steps. And it's interesting because the book, of course, comes from this martial arts tradition where even if you're not, I mean, I've never taken a martial arts class, but my understanding from the book is even if you're not using that move like in an actual engagement with someone, or a competition, you're actually practicing that move in that exact way, in that exact sequence, over and over and over again, whatever that particular move is that you're learning, right?
Yes, and if you're a musician, you're practicing your scales over and over and over.
Right.
If you're a surgeon, you're practicing, your surgical techniques. A buddy of mine who I grew up with, when he was in medical school, went over his house, and he had all these chicken breasts out on the table, and a needle and thread, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He goes, I got to practice my suturing.
I love it,
and,
on the chicken breast.
He's a great doctor.
Well, let's talk. I want to move forward and talk a little bit. I think I remember right that this is the way that you actually kicked off our call, which is by talking about, I love how he identifies these 3 personalities that get in the way of achieving mastery. And I just want to run through them real quick for the folks on the call, and then I want to ask, I'll say which one I think is my biggest hole in the sand, so to speak, and then I want to ask Barnaby and Shinfun and Paul if they could identify which one or ones get in their way. So he talks about the dabbler, and the dabbler approaches each new opportunity with this great enthusiasm, and he gets all excited, and he goes out and he buys the brand new clubs and the shoes and whatever he's supposed to wear for the wardrobe, and then he starts to get bored, right? And he's like, oh, this is a lot of work. I'm going to have to spend a lot of time on this. And then he's like, forget it. I'm going to, forget golf, and I'm going to take up basketball. And then he goes out and buys all the basketball equipment. So he just jumps from thing to thing. This is the one that I think I am, partly, which is the obsessive. So you start out by making progress because you're sort of obsessively following the rules and you're trying to do everything perfect. But then at a certain point, you're going to hit the plateau because the plateau is part of the learning process. And when you hit it, you don't know what to do because you just keep thinking you can somehow obsessively work your way through it and not get stuck on the plateau. And these were the times when I called you in hysterics saying, I am never going to become a decent copywriter. I'll never be able to have a control. I can't write a sidebar. I don't know how to do a bullet. Everything I do sucks. I should go out and shoot myself. Which is why I love when you started the call by saying I had you read this book so you wouldn't kill yourself during the process. And the third one is the hacker. And I think I have a little bit of this now. I have to watch out for this. And the hacker is like you get good at a thing, but just good enough. And then you start getting sloppy and you stop putting in the amount of time and attention. And to your point, you can't do that, right? Because you're not getting 100% response rate. So you need to keep learning. So I'm just curious, Barnaby, what do you think is your, if you had to say, which personality do you think is your biggest foible?
Yeah, I think like you, a little bit of the obsessive and a little bit of the hacker. In that, those of us who go into copywriting, we're all pretty goal-oriented, and we expect to keep, setting goals and meeting them. And you work and you work and you work, and then when you don't meet them, or you either fall short or hit a plateau, it can get really frustrating.
Yeah, we've definitely
demoralized.
Can I break in for a second, Marcella?
At any point in time.
I think everybody is every one of these, depending on what you're doing. Like in golf, I'm a hacker. I just don't give a crap. I just, step up, and I don't care if I golf well or not. I know I'm not going to spend, 3 hours a day every day of my life to be good at it.
Right.
But anyway, what I wanted to point out is that Barnaby is, I think, I would define Barnaby as a master at tennis, and I would define, besides copywriting, which they're both like exceptional copywriters, I would say that Barnaby is a master at tennis. He has a world ranking in his age group. And I would say that Paul is a master at martial arts. He's trained a lot of people in mixed martial arts. Shin Fun also is a martial artist. Shin, I don't know how highly you would rate your skill in that area, but I think this gives us an opportunity to get perspectives from these people who are very good at things other than copywriting.
Yeah, that's true, because there's someone who's been down that course of mastery before, and yet they can see how that applies to where they're at in terms of their journey with copywriting. Paul, I wanted to give you a quick chance to say, you know, for you, when you're working towards becoming a master copywriter at the level that Parris is, where do you see your biggest temptation or challenge? Which one of these tends to catch you up?
I would say probably the obsessive. You know, there's definitely I have a pretty strong perfectionist streak, which I think can be really an asset with the pursuit of mastery, because it keeps you focused on getting better. But it's also a big detriment, because if you focus on those details too much, you drive yourself crazy and you want to go jump off a bridge. So.
Right, or you get frustrated because you haven't become a success in 3 days, right? Because you're like, I should be perfect by now. Shin Fun, where would you put yourself in terms of the thing that catches you up the most? I know you're a perfectionist too.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of everything, like Parris said.
Yeah.
Depends on what I do.
And I think that's I think that's really good point for all of us to remember, which is that we're all going to go through those different stages and fall into those different patterns on the road to mastery. And I want to start out, when we talk about what is mastery, Shin Fun, I want to start out with the quotes that you picked, and I want to ask you just a little bit about your own personal journey to master copywriting, because not only have you achieved this incredible success as a copywriter, you're working with Boardroom now, but this isn't even your first language, which just completely blows my mind. So I want to start out, you picked...
This first language is very different from English. In Chinese, there is no past tense or future tense. There's only present tense. In Chinese, there are no plurals. I mean, it's just crazy how different a language he grew up with. And yet, this guy is like amazing as a copywriter writing in English.
Half the time he kicks our English-speaking butts. So, Shin Fun, you said, the quote you picked was, you know, what is mastery? It brings rich rewards, yet it is not really a goal or a destination, but rather a process, a journey. We call this journey mastery. It isn't reserved for the super talented or even for those who are fortunate enough to have gotten an early start. It's available to anyone who is willing to get on the path and stay on it, regardless of age, sex, or previous experience, or in your case, English as a first language. And I wondered if you could just say a little bit, just very briefly, what this process of mastery has been like for you. And I kind of put this curve here, you know, that they talk about in terms of stops and starts and leaps and backtracking. And I wondered if you could just give us a little bit of what it has been like for you to have to learn to master this skill of copywriting in a language that isn't even your first language and in constructs that might not even make sense to you.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's difficult because every time I write, I have to think about whether it should be singular, plural, and whether I should use this tense or that tense. But the quote, can you back up the one slide?
Yes. Give me the second. You want the first or the second one?
This second one. No, this
one.
The other one. Yes, this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this really helped me. I think it's probably one of the most helpful quotes from this book for me, because when I'm still learning, and there's always a voice in my head saying, can I really do this? Can I really pull this off? Because of all these disadvantages I have. But these quotes really, get me going, because it really doesn't matter what your experience or your background. If you are willing to put in the hard work, you can make it work.
I'm really glad that you picked this quote, because last month we read Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, and that's really exactly what she said. And in fact, she has this hysterical section where she says, you take all those voices in your head that tell you that you can't do this, and you picture them as these sort of little yapping mice, and you put them in a glass jar, and then you imagine shoving the lid down on them as they sort of claw and try to get out, and they're yapping away, and you just lock them up and sit them away on your desk and get them out of your mind. And I think it is so important that we not listen to those voices that say, who are you to do this? You'll never be able to get there. You'll never become a master. And that we do remember anyone can do it if you are willing to get on the path and stay on it. It's that, as writers, we call it the butt glue, right? If you are just willing to glue your butt to the chair and put in the time to write, you improve as a writer. I want to go to, go ahead. Did you have something you wanted to say, Shenfun?
Yeah, I think of something along the line that Parris said to me ages ago, which stuck in my mind, and it's something like at the time I was writing bullets for boardroom, and I was having trouble, not sure whether I'm writing, not sure whether my bullets are strong. I feel like I don't have enough understanding of the audience and blah blah blah. And what Parris said to me is, don't think of yourself as not being good enough or not having enough understanding, but just think of how you can get better and better. And I thought that's really helpful.
Yeah, there's this great concept that I learned from Dan Sullivan, a strategic coach, and it's called the gap. And the gap is the distance between where you are now and this goal, this ideal you have, like the ideal picture in your mind. And focusing on that gap is a recipe for unhappiness. Because the truth of the matter is, there's no such thing. That ideal is just a construct you made up in your head. It doesn't exist. So he likens it to the horizon line. If you're, let's say you're at the beach and you're looking out and you can see the horizon, the end of where the water ends and the sky begins, right? And he'll say to people, doesn't it bug you that if you got in a speedboat and went as fast as you could, you would never reach that horizon line? And they're like, no. He goes, really? It doesn't bother you? I mean, look, it's up there. Don't you want to get there? Isn't it making you crazy that you can't reach it? And they're like, no, why would it make me crazy? He goes, well, then why are you doing that with the horizon line you've created in your mind, with this ideal that doesn't exist? We're all running towards this ideal that's just something we made up. And you're never going to get there, ergo, you're always going to be miserable. What you really need to do is not look in front of you to see how far it is to get where you're going. It's to look behind you and see how far you've come.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly measuring yourself based on improvement rather than based on, this abstract, unrealistic ideal, then you're going to be a much happier person. And you're also going to be more effective because you're going to be more zen about the whole thing.
And you were incredibly helpful with me, too, because what I would do is compare, like, this perfect finished Magalog from you or another, Gary Bensavenga, some A-list writer, to what I was trying to do in my sidebar. And I kept looking at that and looking at what I was writing and getting completely discouraged. And you're like, well, you would have to go back and compare your sidebar to the first sidebar I wrote 20 years ago and the second draft of it. But you're,
Right.
stop that, and that's another way we make this horizon that's like impossible.
The other quote, I'll give you another quote from Dan Sullivan. He says, stop comparing your backstage to other people's front stage.
That's great.
In other words, you're looking at their performance on stage. You're seeing the finished product. You're not seeing all the turmoil that went behind it. You're not seeing the rehearsals and the rewrites of the play and the 100 million things that went wrong and the guy throwing up in the bathroom before he walks out on stage. You're not seeing any of that, right?
Exactly.
So, of course, you're seeing all of that in your own life because you're living it. And so we tend to compare our backstage to their front stage. We're not
Parris,
seeing everything. We're seeing the tip of the iceberg, to use another metaphor. We're not seeing what's beneath the iceberg. So you have to stop comparing yourself to other people because you don't know what else is going on in their life. There's
Let
that,
me ask you real
quick, self-help, compare and despair.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to just make sure to capture this resource for folks, which is one thing we try to do as we go on the call, which is I know that you're part of a coaching group that Dan Sullivan has called Strategic Coach, but I remember either you or David once loaned me a fabulous set of tapes from him. So if people just Google Dan Sullivan Strategic Coach, will they find this resource that you're talking about and some of his?
They'll probably find a ton of stuff. Dan has been on a tear. He's writing like 4 books a year now. Each one, they're little tiny books, each one on a different concept. And certainly find those. But if you want a great introduction to the concepts, to the core concepts, Nightingale Conant has a Dan Sullivan audio program. I think it's called Pure Genius.
That's the one, and I think David sent me that. And, of course, they often come to AWAI, Nightingale Conant does, and they have often looked for and hired AWAI-trained writers. So, of course, I'm all about, supporting the businesses that support AWAI. So, folks, feel free to look at Nightingale Conant and see if you can find that Dan Sullivan material also. I think that's a great suggestion.
They have terrific products. I mean, they have the best
really
products
do.
As far as personal development, business. I mean, it's just a great stuff.
And that's what you want to write for if that's the self-help market is something you're interested in. I mean, that's like Boardroom is for health or Healthy Directions is for health. That is, Nightingale Conant is definitely one of the stars.
Right, except that they don't pay royalties.
I knew you were going to have to put that in there. Yeah, I want to talk just a little bit about teachers and students. And I'm going to embarrass you just a little bit by saying, people ask me all the time, how do you find a mentor? How do you find a good teacher? And I will say that I think it's really important that you follow this instruction, which is don't look for a guru, look for a teacher. And here's why. I came from the University of Chicago. We had, Nobel laureates. This was long before the Obama days. We had, physicists, people who were winning, every prize known to mankind. And you would sign up for this class for this brilliant person, and you would come in and they could not teach their way out of a paper bag, and you just stopped even going to class. You wanted to beat your head against the wall. To me, that was a guru. That was not a teacher. When I began working with you and you began this apprentice program of yours, you are truly a teacher. You show by example. You have this crazy encyclopedic memory. You make every moment a teaching moment. Even just in a conversation, you'll pause just like you did and you'll say, well, have you read this thing by Dan Sullivan? Here's how he phrases it. You'll give me a metaphor or a mini lesson. And I think I want to encourage the people on this call, when you are asking, who can help me get to this next level of mastery, I want you to keep in mind you are not looking for the guru. You are looking for the teacher, for someone who's a born teacher, who loves to teach, who sort of can't help but teach. I mean, you know, Parris, I call you to just, you know, have a 2-second phone call to ask you about something, and by the end we've had a whole lesson on something. Sometimes it's not even the topic I called about, and you know, it's just amazing. And now I want to turn it around and I want to ask you, what do you look for in apprentices? I mean, you know, there was a whole group of us who started out together, but, you know, not everybody made it, and many people dropped out along the way. And so when you are trying to put together your apprentice program, what do you think makes a good student? What characteristics do the people on the call need to be a good student?
Okay, so what I was looking for in the beginning, the number one thing I was looking for was the desire and the drive and the willingness to do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story there about a martial arts master in China. It was actually in Bill Moyers. There was a documentary with Bill Moyers about Chinese medicine and stuff, and it was in there. And people would come, they'd want to learn from this guy, and he would say, come meet me at the park. There was a park in Beijing, you know, where he would be every morning. Come meet me at 6 o'clock, 6 a.m. every morning, right?
Right.
And the deal was you'd have to meet him there every morning at 6 a.m. for like a year. And if you did that, then he'd say, okay, you're serious. I'll teach you now.
I love it. It's true. It's true. Because it takes just as much effort on the part of the student as it does on the teacher. It's a collaborative process, and you learn from your fellow students and you learn from your teacher, but you also have to be willing to show up, which is another part of practice, is showing up. And that's a good segue into talking about practice, which I think is one of the most important concepts of the book. And Paul, I'm going to cue you up here in a second. I wanted to say that part of what we did when we were apprentices is that we would read books, and every week we had homework. No matter what, you would give us homework. And sometimes, you know, we would email each other. Sometimes we would email you, and you would send out the document. So, of course, I tried to get you guys to do homework for the book, and I said, you know, send your quotes, send what it means to you. And I loved this because Paul is the one who focused on practice, and I'm going to share his quote. And then, Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot. I put most of your email actually into this presentation so folks would have it to keep, but I wanted to ask you, you can either have me flip through the slides, but to read and share what you sent around, because, of course, Parris immediately said, yes, that is killer, that's the point. And then all of us started jumping on and said, that's it, you've got it, you know, that's the aha moment. So before we get to Paul's aha moment about teaching, I want to start with this quote about practice, which is, the people we know as masters don't devote themselves to their particular skill just to get better at it. The truth is they love to practice, and because of this, they do get better. And then to complete the circle, the better they get, the more they enjoy performing the same basic moves over and over again. So, Paul, I wanted to know if you could take over, and because it's going to sound a lot better if you read this in your voice than if I read this in your voice. And I don't think I could even imitate your voice. And I'll just click through as you read.
That's a great voice.
So
oh, my God, you guys are going to make me blush. So am I on? Can everyone hear me?
You're on. Go ahead, awesome. And I'll click as you read.
Wow, well, thank you for the kind words. And even from Parris, a compliment from Parris is like manna from heaven.
You know, they're like gold. We save them up like gold chips.
I know. I'm pinching myself right now. So my big takeaway here was, you know, that there's this whole idea of the plateau, right, where that's where you're going to spend most of your time on any pursuit. That's just the nature of the beast. You're going to see these big jumps in performance, and then things are going to feel easy, and you're going to kind of be in that flow, and then you're going to hit a plateau, and you're going to stay on that plateau for a long time, despite, no matter how much effort you put in. And the key to staying in the game is understanding that you need both. So you need to love the practice, and you need to accept the plateau. You need to really do both. So they actually require one another. So I think what I wrote is accepting the plateau requires that you love the practice, and loving the practice requires that you accept the plateau. Mm-hmm. And you need to do both of those. So hold on, let me switch back to the WebEx here. So that's what really gives you the ability to kind of stay in the game. Certainly for me, there's been a lot of times when I've just been like, you know what, it would be a lot easier to just go get I think what I said is go get a real job, or take a full-time copywriting gig with some company. When I was at these stages of being super frustrated, even though it's not what I want, because I was just stuck in this cycle of, being on that plateau. But staying focused on that idea that loving the plateau, loving the practice in and of itself, has allowed me to kind of stay in the game and have that patience, trusting that massive improvement will come.
And I wanted to ask if you would share the story that you shared with us about having, as Parris said, being a master of martial arts, being involved for over 20 years, but now how that's changed at 40 and how that has really that's what really gave you this aha moment about the practice, because the practice is different now than when you were 18, 19, 20.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing was, I've always loved training. The first day I discovered martial arts, I've loved all the martial arts I've done, and I've done everything from Tai Chi to Muay Thai to MMA. And as I get older, my body has definitely felt the impact of 20 years of training, in both good and bad ways. But it also just becomes harder to progress. That progress comes in smaller spurts and over longer and longer gaps. And, just because of other demands of my time, business, and now, a new family, I'm having to deal with the reality that, progress is really not why I'm doing this anymore. I always had the idea in the back of my head that someday I was going to get back in the ring. Someday I was going to get back in the cage and go and fight again. And then, I went to my gym recently and, was like, all right, I'm going to go. I'm going to go on Saturday, the big sparring day for all the young and hungry pro and amateur fighters we have in the gym. I'm going to spar with these guys, just like the old days. And I got my butt kicked just so badly. So badly. And
they should have a senior circuit.
Senior circuit, that's
like
right.
they do in golf, they should have senior martial arts circuits.
They should, and then we'd have shorter rounds and longer breaks. We could weave.
And EMT standing by. I didn't say that.
Ice bags for your knees in between rounds.
And I love how you said, what I really love is how you took that experience of now you're in sort of this humbling stage of, I'm no longer the teacher. I'm no longer the young punk with who can take anybody out because my body's changed. I'm older. This is a really physically demanding sport. But yet, you're the 20-year-old, young, hungry, successful 20-year-old when it comes to copywriting. And I loved how you put that together. And I'm just going to read a little bit of the email you sent, and I love this. And then, Parris, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about this. Paul, what you said was, the same lessons apply to copywriting. Right now, I'm in that magical growth period where everything seems easy. Copy just flows from my fingertips. Controls are falling left and right, and I'm pretty sure my clients think I'm a genius. But this honeymoon period is the result of years of blood, sweat, and tears, and it only came about because I was willing to stick out a brutally long plateau, the kind of plateau where everything that could go wrong did. If I didn't have mastery sitting on my desk, I might have thrown in the towel, and I came close. At one point, I even thought about getting a real job. But I just kept my head down and hung in there. And despite things being pretty great now, I know that another plateau will come. That's okay. In fact, I will welcome it because that will set me up for another big jump in skill and income. And so, Parris, what I wanted to ask you about is what sustains you and motivates you when you're in that plateau? What keeps you going when you're in the plateau?
Okay, if I'm going to be perfectly honest here, I'm more the obsessive.
Mm-hmm.
This whole idea of practicing just for the joy of practicing, that sounds great, but I don't know that a whole lot of people do that. It usually starts with some external reward that they want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So for me, it was about the money,
mm-hmm.
right? And, nobody's like when they're 6 years old says, I want to be a direct response copywriter when I grow up. It doesn't work that way. So it was about the money, and the money was the driver. Now, there does come a point when it does become enjoyable, right? So, I've heard a few people talk about this. Scott Adams, the guy who created Burr,
mm-hmm.
right? He wrote a book about it, and when how everybody says, follow your passion, he was like, no, I did it for the money. He said, I became passionate about it. It's easy to become passionate about it when people are paying you great sums of money to draw cartoons, basically, right?
Right.
And then I've heard...
Not a bad gig.
Mark Cuban say the same thing. Mark Cuban's a billionaire, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says it's just easier to enjoy stuff when you're getting paid a lot of bread to do it. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying do something you hate for the money, because that's golden handcuffs. That's the most miserable existence you can have in life.
Right.
Find something you like, something you're good at, and something that there's a demand that people pay for, and that's the recipe for success, right?
Exactly.
So what kept me going through the really bad periods was my belief that in the end, things would turn out really well for me.
And what's interesting is he talks about visualizing that success when he talks about intentionality. And I wonder if a little bit of that, I remember you shared with me, it's been some time now, and I could have this wrong, you can correct me, but didn't you share with me that you actually visualized like the kind of house you were going to buy and the kind of life you were going to lead, that it wasn't an intangible. You had a clear intention and a vision of what you were working to create for your life with this skill.
That's right. And what happens is when you do that, you end up achieving those things, provided you put in the work, of course. It's not like just the secret where you put it out to the universe and it magically comes to you with no effort on your part. But if you do have these visualizations, if you do picture what kind of house am I going to live in, what kind of car am I going to drive, what's my daily life going to look like, who am I going to hang out with, who am I going to be married to, all that kind of stuff, your subconscious starts going to work figuring out how to get you there.
Exactly, and then you can connect the practice to the goal.
Yeah, I want to say another thing about what keeps you on the path practicing when you hit plateaus. A moment ago, I talked about what kept me on the path when things were like horrible, when I was in the abyss.
Right.
Okay? So what kept me going was this visualizing the future. What keeps you going when you're on a plateau is, in a sense, visualizing the past. So let me explain what I mean. If you're practicing scales on the guitar, it's very tedious and repetitive and boring. It's not fun. But if you're playing a solo in front of cheering people, that's damn fun. Right? So you start out and you suck, and then you practice your scales, and you get to a level of proficiency when you can do a pretty decent solo in a rock and roll song because you know the pentatonics, right? The pentatonic scales. And you can get up there and you can do a good job, right? And so you've just come a long way, and people are cheering and all that stuff, and it feels great. But then you hit a plateau because now you're trying to become better, and you're trying to learn these other more difficult scales, or maybe you're learning jazz scales or something like that, right? Very hard you're back to the monotony and the boredom of all that stuff, and you're on a plateau, and what keeps you going is remembering, you know, the past when you were great at the pentatonic scales and how good that felt. And
remembering those breakthroughs, those moments of glory.
Right. So, you know, enjoy your successes and your victories, and let them keep you going through your dry periods and plateaus.
And, you know, that's something you did.
Like Dan Sullivan says, go look at how far you've come.
I was going to exactly say that's what you did for me when I would be really struggling. You would call me on the phone and you would remind me of all my past successes. And I think, again, that's one thing, folks on the call, you know, I'm always encouraging people to find that peer group, whether it's through Circle of Success or folks that you meet at boot camp, you know, to put together your group. They're not only there to cheer you on and encourage you there, but they're also there when you hit the plateau and you think that you're never going to get any better. They're there to remind you of your past successes and say things like, remember when you didn't think you could do this and you did that. Remember when you got this control. Remember when you didn't even think you could land your first job and you did. I want to ask real quick if everyone's okay for staying just about 5 minutes over. Parris, is that all right? I want to be aware of your time. I know we're coming up on 4 o'clock, and we've just got Barnaby's quotes to go through and a few wrap-ups. Are you okay to hang on a little bit longer?
Yeah, I'm okay. Okay,
great. So the last step here of his keys is now how do you push yourself even higher? So you know, this is kind of where we talked about you achieve a certain amount of success, and then for me it's real easy to sort of go, phew, thank God I got here, and then take a break, right? But how do you keep pushing yourself? And so one of the things you said, Parris, was, you know, keep imagining that next success. And Barnaby's quote, he picked 2 quotes here. He said, mastery is not about perfection, it's about the journey. The master is the one who stays on the path day after day, year after year. The master is one who is willing to try and fail and try again as long as he or she lives. And I think that's so important because you have to stop being afraid of failure. You have to be willing to take risks. For me, I think sometimes I let my fear of failure get in the way of me trying something I haven't done before. And that's because that's my schema, right, is to be terrified to fail. And so I have to get to the point where I'm willing to become the apprentice again, meaning I'm willing to try something I'm not good at that I don't know is a home run. Maybe it's a new industry. Maybe it's a new format that I haven't tried before, a new test cover that seems completely crazy and counterintuitive, but I got to take those risks. Otherwise you can't keep learning, because if you're afraid to fail all the time, then as soon as you achieve a modest amount of success, you quit, you know? And for you, what is that like to keep pushing? You've achieved this huge success. What do you do to keep pushing yourself to take more risks when it would be easy to not take them?
I don't consider myself a huge risk taker.
Mm-hmm.
But if I look back at my life, all the greatest things that have ever happened to me have been the result of taking risk, going outside of my comfort zone. And
I imagine starting the apprentice program was going outside of your comfort zone.
Not so much. Maybe.
Yeah?
Actually, now that I think of that, no, it wasn't really outside my comfort zone because I enjoyed teaching and, you know.
I was thinking more of the introvert part of it, but you are a born teacher, that's for sure.
I am an introvert, but I can turn it on when I need to. I can get up on a stage if I need to. I can do all that kind of stuff. The difference is that the way I recharge my batteries is by being alone, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, if I love going to an event and hanging out with people, but after that 3 days is over, I got to go be by myself for a while. Whereas with you, Marcella, you're an extrovert. The way you get recharged is by being with people, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, like, you spend all your days in a room by yourself writing copy, you need to go out there and see people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But what was the question again?
Risk-taking, like how do you push yourself? Here you've achieved this amazing level of success in this industry.
Here's a good way to do it. Remember that nothing great comes without risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, keep coming back to Dan Sullivan. He says confidence comes from first making a decision to do something, committing to something. He calls it the 4 C's. Committing. Then after you commit to something, you need courage to do it because it's pretty scary doing this stuff, right?
Right.
Then after you commit and have the courage and actually do it, that's when you get the capability from having done something, and then that gives you courage,
mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So, most people, they sit around going, I'm going to do X, I'm going to commit to doing X when I get the courage to do it. Well, guess what? You're never going to do X because you're not going to get the courage to do it, or the capabilities, or the confidence, rather, because you have to go through that courage phase, and the courage phase really feels lousy. It's really scary and uncomfortable, and it's not fun at all. So an interesting thing is that you get successful people, and the way they got successful is by constantly putting their ass on the line and having to be in a place that requires courage. And yet, when they have kids, they want to spare them of that. So what happens to their kids? Their kids end up being, not all.
They don't have the same kind of success because they're not pushed.
They end up right. Now, and here's another thing. This was a huge one for me, huge. Because as I mentioned, I'm not by nature a risk taker. I'd like to stay in my comfortable little place and not have to, do things that don't feel good, right?
Right.
This was a great one. I forget where it was. It was in some book I read, and it's the front porch thing. The front porch thing. Imagine yourself sitting on the front porch when you're 98 years old, looking back at your life. What are your regrets?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the regrets are never, I shouldn't have done that risky business deal. The regrets are always what I should have done.
Yeah.
I should have gone up to that pretty girl and asked her to dance. I should have, started a business instead of working as a wage slave.
Right.
I should have written that book that I wanted to write. They're always, I should have. They're never, I shouldn't have done that.
Right. And they do that study when they ask people that in a nursing home, and that is their answer. It's almost always a regret that they did not do something, not a regret that they did.
Right. So if you want to spur yourself to take more risks, picture yourself sitting on the front porch when you're 98 years old and asking yourself, what are my regrets? And then say to yourself, okay, well, I don't want to have those regrets. I got to do shit.
There's another book, I think it's called The 5 Wishes by, I think it's Gay Hendricks, and the same person who wrote the book we're going to read next month, and he says, it sounds a little morbid, but his version is, you're driving home tonight and imagine that there's this horrific car crash and you're just taken out, right? And then in that moment, what would flash through your mind that you wish you had done? So like, what have I not done? Now it's all over. I don't get any more chances after 5 p.m. tonight. What have I not done? A little bit more morbid, but the same kind of idea to get you to tap into that sense of what do I want to do? What risks do I want to take? What am I afraid of? I want to move to Barnaby now. Put you on the hot seat here. This quote is the one that Barnaby picked. When you're climbing a mountain, be aware that the peak is ahead, but don't keep looking at it. Keep your eyes on the path, and when you reach the top of the mountain, as the Zen saying goes, keep on climbing. And Parris, this reminds me so much of your horizon comment that you were just talking about, right? Don't don't stand there and stare at that peak that's miles and miles away. Keep your focus on your feet in front of there. And Barnaby, I'm not even going to attempt your Canadian accent. I'm teasing you.
Hey.
Would you read your comment for us?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of an optimistic angle on this, which is that Mastery is really a perfect book for copywriters because nobody ever really gets there. You know, as Parris said, you know, until you get 100% response, and even the IRS doesn't get 100% response. So the journey never really ends, you know, no matter how long you're in this business, there's always new discoveries, new ahas to get you excited again. And A-list writers like Parris, you know, just amaze us because they're relentless about studying, about analyzing, about always improving their understanding of human nature and copywriting techniques. They're always climbing, you know, no matter how far they've gotten. And so more than anything, you know, Mastery to me is also an inspiration to carry on.
I love it. I think that's a great quote to end on.
I want to ask you guys something. I'm looking at the number of attendees on this webinar, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that this got fewer attendees than some of the other books you did. Would I be correct?
No, it's more that folks don't attend on the live call. They watch it on YouTube. And so over the days, the numbers go up, up, and up because we've actually done a crazy collection of books. We've done writing books. We've done motivational books. We've done a little bit of everything. I try to follow what you taught me, which is you can learn a lot from books even if they're not a specific copywriting book. And we had a lot of interest in you as a guest for this call as well. So I think we'll continue to see the numbers go up over the next several days because people do tend to listen to the YouTube video, and you can access the recording live from the Great Books page on the AWAI website. But was there a reason, were you thinking?
Yeah, I'll tell you what my thinking was, is that people tend to be more interested in the sexy stuff, right? This is the least sexy book you could ever talk about, right? This isn't about secrets and tactics, and it's just about the front work, right? And so the people who actually are on this call, I'm gonna guess, are the people who are really serious. And so I want to reward those people by sharing a few more things if we have a few moments. Is that okay?
I would absolutely love it, and I think that's a very good point because this call is about doing the work.
Okay. So the secret is you want to read the great copywriting books like John Capel's Tested Advertising Methods, Vic Schwab, How to Write a Good Advertisement, you know, Dale
Scientific
Carnegie,
Advertising.
Scientific Advertising, the Robert Collier letters. You want to read the classics, but you don't just want to read them. You want to know them inside out. You want to have an encyclopedic knowledge of everything that came before you. You want to know what beat what. You know, this package beat that package. You want to do all that stuff. You want to learn all the rules, and the biggest bang for your buck is going to be in the books because they're like cheap. They're $15, $20, right?
Right.
And you're learning from, you know, with John Capel's, you're getting 50 years of wisdom and experience distilled into this book, right?
Right.
Same with Schwab. And you want to know them inside and out. And then you want to read, of course, Cialdini. You want to know that inside and out. And then you want to read Breakthrough Advertising. Breakthrough Advertising is a bear of a book to get through because he crams everything in there. And there's so much stuff in there that your head's going to explode when you try to read it. So what I would advise people is just read the first 2 or 3 chapters, the ones that talk about stages of awareness and stages of sophistication. And get that part down. If you get stages of awareness and stages of sophistication, you will catapult to the top 10% of copywriters alive. I know this call has been about slow and steady and plateaus and this and that and the other thing, but breakthrough advertising is, it's like, you know, the 80-20 principle?
Right.
Breakthrough advertising is the 20% of knowledge that gives you 80% of the results. So probably it's more. It's like 90% of results, and it's like 5% of the knowledge. It's like it is that.
It's graduate school is what it is. It's graduate school. Yep.
So, and don't just know it, kind of know it, and let me refer back to it when I need to. No, you have to commit everything to memory. You have to memorize this stuff. You have to know it backwards and forwards, and I'll tell you why. You know that method for creativity where you sit down and you immerse yourself in the thing, and then you go step away from it, and while you're doing something totally unrelated, maybe you're in the shower, maybe you're playing with your kid, maybe you're driving to work, boom, the idea for the killer headline pops into your head. You've heard this before, right?
Yep.
Okay. The reason that happens is because your subconscious mind continues to work on the problem while your conscious mind is doing something else, right?
Right.
But here's the point. Your subconscious mind cannot come up with a great headline if it doesn't know what the rules of a great headline are.
And if it hasn't internalized them so that you don't even have to think about it.
Right. If you haven't internalized all the stuff you've learned, right?
Yep.
Then you're going to continue to plod around. You're going to be a dabbler, a hacker, or whatever you want to call it, right? If you want to be a master, you can't just read the book and say, okay, check that one off the list. I read Capable. Let me go read Slaughterhouse now. No.
Right.
That's not what a master does. A master learns the book inside out. Here's how I would do it, okay? I would read the book, then I would read it again and yellow highlight the stuff that was, like, really important. Then I would go through the book and take notes on the yellow highlights. And by the time you do that, you internalized it. You own it, you know it, you can spout it off on a moment's notice. That somebody asks you a question, boom, okay?
And that's one of the reasons why I started this book club, was because I had gone through them with you as an apprentice. I had read them, we discussed them on the call, but I felt like I was losing that knowledge that that it had been so long. And I felt like I hadn't, you know, it's like that thing when you, it's the difference between knowing a language and then becoming fluent in it. And when I was in college, I had taken, I don't know, a gazillion years of French. I was a senior. I could speak it in my little classes and in my little conversation groups. And my teacher said to me, you really have to go to Paris or France, and you have to be there for a certain amount of time frame so that this becomes your language, and you think it and you sleep in it and you become fluent in it, and then you'll never learn it again. And I had no money. I'm a poor, starving student. I couldn't manage to do it. And I didn't believe him. He said, if you don't do this, you're going to forget this within 10 years. And I was like, no, I've been studying French for, you know, whatever it is, 12 years. There's no way I could forget. And, of course, I forgot. And so for me, I started out the Great Books Club because I wanted to do exactly that. I wanted to go completely through the canon again, this time not only remembering the lessons that you taught me, but trying to help teach them to other people and to solidify them in my own brain so that then they became more and more a part of me, because just the first time through I was barely grasping the concepts, let alone really assimilating them. And I think that's a really great point, and that's the difference between someone, like you say, who's just the dabbler and someone who's really serious and committed to becoming an A-list writer. I want to jump to our homework, which is Parris set this up great for us with his detailed explanation of what he would do if you want to make the commitment to mastery. So we always had homework on our calls as apprentices that we had to do every week. So I'm going to ask you guys, this week's homework is I want you to jump on the Facebook page. Just for fun, tell me which type you are, the dabbler, the obsessive, the hacker, some combination, and then share one commitment. And Parris gave you a whole bunch of ideas on this call. Share one commitment that you're going to make towards achieving mastery. Next month, we have as our guest Mike Palmer, who many of you know also is a copy chief. He's an A-list writer for Stansberry Research. It's going to be another group in that Mike is going to have his copy team join us on the call. And the book we're going to do is Win Your Case by Gary Spence. And this is a book, Parris, I know you, Shin Fun, did you come to the Titans event? I know you were there, Barnaby. Paul was there.
Shin was not there.
Okay. No. This was when Gary Bensavenga was speaking, another fantastic A-list writer. And Gary mentioned that he learned more about storytelling and how to build a case through story and make a winning argument from this trial lawyer, Jerry Spence. And so Mike Palmer said that what he learned from the great Gary Bensavenga was the importance of proof, and that became a turning point for him, was really understanding the importance of proof. And so what we're going to do next month is we're going to read Win Your Case by this famous trial lawyer, and then we're going to talk about how that applies to building a story and a promotion around proof elements and how you can become the master of proof. And the book is called Win Your Case, How to Present, Persuade, and Prevail Every Place, Every Time by Gary Spence. And,
Gary Spence has never lost a case.
Ever, right? Yeah, David told me that.
That quote that I always throw out, that you've heard me say, Marcella, speak in actions, not abstractions, that comes from Jerry Spence. That's Jerry Spence.
Really?
So
I didn't know that.
That's a great book, and Mike Palmer is maybe the best copy chief alive. I mean, he takes people off the street and turns them into world-class copywriters, so that should be a great call.
I am going to attempt to completely slaughter the names of our winners. So when you join up for the Great Books Club, and I know we had a lot of new members this month, Parris, knowing that you were going to be on the call. I was getting requests all the time. So I want to remind folks that when you join, you actually get put in the drawing, and we give away 10 books every month. So these folks will get Win Your Case, Patricia Thompson, Melwin Zachary, Ricky Weissenhut, Neil Brown, Andriette Duplessis, Daniel Rustad, Ronald Natz, Susan Panzeri, Michelle Anderson, and Faith Sage. And once again, I apologize for completely butchering those names. 2 more reminders. After we do Win Your Case, we're going to do The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, which is about getting out of your own way. So in other words, it's about the things that we do that it's a great book to follow mastery, because this is about how do you stop yourself when you get close to that breakthrough. A lot of us do self-sabotage things to throw the brakes on, especially when we start to have some major breakthroughs. And so this is about how do you get out of your own way and have that big leap, those big breakthroughs. And then John Ford, another fantastic writer that many of you know from AWAI. We're going to do Stephen King's On Writing Together, another book I know, Parris, that you've had us read as apprentices and that you and I have talked about before. So I hope folks will stay with us for this year. We've got some great stuff coming up. I just want to take a minute to wrap up the call. Parris, I really want to say thank you for everything that you brought to the call today, but more importantly for everything that you've taught me in the last decade. And I can say without any doubt that I would not be the writer I am today without the incredible mentoring and training I have received from you. And I want to thank my fellow apprentices for joining me on the call, Barnaby Kalin, Shin Fun, Paul Martinez. It has been a fantastic journey with you guys. I have had so much fun biking through New York as well as copywriting. And I really appreciate all of you taking the time to come on the call today and share some of your wisdom with all the folks who are listening.
And thank you, Marcella.
This has been great, and I hope we'll get to see each other in person soon. We need another New York adventure. All right. Take care, guys. And we are at the end of time and over, but if you have any additional questions for Parris, you can post them on the Facebook page, and Parris, I'll send you a link to that, and if you get a chance to respond, you can, as well as for our other guests. I'll make sure you guys are connected. And if any of the listeners are not on the Facebook page yet, remember to go there, and you've got the slide with the directions here to get you on the Facebook page. And do your homework. All right, we will see you next month. Is there any other reminders we need to give anybody, Denise, or are we good to go?
You're good to go. And thank you and all your wonderful guests for taking us through this book.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.